Welcome to part 3 of this solar blanket shootout. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2 yet, go and check those out first. Now this section is where we get deep into the performance testing and see how they hold up in the real world. Let's go!
Here's how we'll do the tests. Each blanket will be connected to an Anderson plug cable with a power meter on one end, which measures the voltage, current and power coming from the blanket. This will connect to the MPPT solar regulator of a Redarc DC to DC charger inside the caravan and then into the caravan batteries. The batteries were around half full to ensure the charger ran in boost mode so the blankets would output their maximum power. In each test, I'll record the date and time, weather conditions, which cable we're charging through, and any other relevant configuration notes which might affect the performance. For each test, I connected the blanket to the regulator and let it run for at least half a minute to allow the power to come up and for the MPPT regulator to find the maximum power point. Once the power reading had basically settled, I monitored the meter for 30 seconds or so and recorded what I considered to be the median power reading. Given each test took at least a minute and I did over 80 separate tests, I'm clearly not going to show you 2 boring hours of a power meter. But I'll just show you this example of what a full-length test looks like so you're satisfied yourself with how I came to my results. I'll show you some highlights of some of the other tests and then just summarise the results at the end. In this case, I recorded the power as 9.8 watts, which was on a completely overcast day. Now remember, as this is real-world testing, not all the tests are going to be under ideal full sun conditions. But that's the idea of the real world. You're not always going to be camping in ideal conditions. So before you buy, you want to know what you can realistically expect in a variety of different real-world conditions. And that's what we're going to find out.
Well, it's the 29th of January 2023. As you can see, it's completely overcast today. We're looking at the iTechWorld at the moment. Just peaked up to 10 watts then. Another hardcore. Into the companion. And lastly, the Redarc. Now remember, the Redarc is only 160 watts, but let's see how it performs. So today we're camped on the banks of the Goulburn River near Shepparton in northwestern Victoria. Today we've got the sun pretty much directly overhead, just past midday. We're using the King's 10 metre cable. Now the iTechWorld. Now for the companion, no dirt or shadows or anything on that blanket. It peaked at 150 there. And now the Redarc. Again, I've got no leaves or anything on that blanket. No shadows. 129 and 30 watts. Wednesday the 22nd of February. We're at Good Hope Campground in Buckland Valley. And the time at the moment is just about 9:30 in the morning. And the sun has just peeked over those hills and we're in a patch here of pretty much complete open sun. Today we're using the King's 10 metre cable because that's the only way we can actually reach across to the caravan from where we are, and we'll be putting the power meter on the end with the blanket. I've just been flattening down this grass to make sure there's as little shade on the blanket as possible. The iTechWorld has been getting around about 130 watts, I'd say. So the Korr sitting around about 120 watts, and that's probably actually because it's sitting back at a lower angle. Now for the companion. Just clear out the front of the blanket. Okay, companion is putting out 135 watts. And lastly, the Redarc, at 58 watts. So you see, that's the difference. With it sitting down at such a flat angle, there's no way it can get anywhere near as much sun as the other ones, which are nicely propped up. Okay, so now I've got the Redarc propped up against the iTechWorld blanket. So straight away, that's up to 115 watts. And the Redarc's slowly creeping higher. I'd call that 120 watts.
Okay, here's a quick montage of some of the other tests. So that's how I did these 85 separate blanket tests. 44 of them were back-to-back under identical conditions, providing 11 complete back-to-back comparisons across 2 months. There would have been more if the iTechWorld blanket hadn't gone back early under warranty, and I'll talk about why that happened in a bit. The conditions of the other 40 tests weren't directly comparable, as sometimes we only needed one blanket out at a time, but the data was so similar I'm confident we've got an accurate picture here. Here's the raw data for nerds who like stats. I'll just point out that the first and the third tests were done under less than ideal conditions, which sometimes happens in the real world, and the iTechWorld for some reason did poorly compared to the others in the second test. Okay, let's see some graphs. The average includes all results including the 3 in poor conditions, so it shows what to plan for if the blankets will sometimes be out on cloudy days. The companion performed the best here, averaging 122 watts, followed by the Hardcore on 112, iTechWorld 106, and finally the Redarc on 102 watts. The Redarc's not so far behind as its lower power rating might suggest. The median takes the middle value and ignores the outlying data points like cloudy or really bright days, so the median shows what to expect under normal clear sunny conditions. Again, the companion was the best here with a median of 139 watts, Hardcore 128, the iTechWorld 125, and the Redarc with 117 watts. Now why are these figures lower than what's on the box? Well, the advertised rating is based on a lab testing standard of a single solar cell, which doesn't take into account the various losses you unavoidably get in the real world from cables, connectors, regulator losses, and so on. Now, we can all claim this is false advertising, and it's definitely misleading, but in the defense of these companies, they're all stuck in the same awkward boat because that's how the standard says to test. And no one's going to advertise a lower real-world output when all their competitors stick with the higher lab test figures. Until the standard changes, I think the solution is for companies like the ones we're looking at today to admit that consumers are being a bit misled with how things are at the moment, to work together to agree on some standard adjustment they'll all make to their lab test results to reflect typical real-world losses that every consumer will face, and stick that adjusted figure on their products rather than what the lab test said. iTechWorld, Hardcore, Companion, Redarc and the rest, I hope you're listening and give this some serious consideration. But until that happens, dear viewers, independent real-world testing like this remains the best indication of what you're likely to get. So if this is helpful to you, please hit those like and subscribe buttons now. It costs you nothing, but it tells YouTube it's good content, so they'll show it to more people, which helps the channel grow. YouTube says that only 2% of my viewers are actually subscribed, which is very low, so it'd be great to change that. The Redarc's advertising is the most accurate here. You can expect just under 3/4 of it advertised 160 watts on a good day. The companion produces about 70% of its advertised rating, and the others are a bit less. If you're looking for a reputable brand solar blanket but you don't have a real-world review like this to work from, a simple rule of thumb is to assume you'll get around about 2/3 of their advertised rating when run through an MPPT regulator. The simple way to work this out is just to multiply the advertised rating by 0.65. You can see that this is about right for the blankets we looked at today. This graph compares the scores in all 11 comparisons. Again, you can see the order generally went Companion, Hardcore, iTechWorld and Redarc, although the Redarc did manage to sneak ahead into third place for a few tests. So the Companion definitely wins in the absolute power test, with Hardcore, iTechWorld and Redarc coming behind. Lastly, a stat I've been asked for in previous reviews, don't ever say I don't listen to feedback, how much do you have to spend per watt of power? And also, how much storage space do they take up per watt of power? Note that in this graph, lower scores are better. At the prices I paid, the Hardcore is the best value at $4.52 per watt. Then the iTechWorld at $4.79 per watt, Companion $4.96 per watt, and the Redarc by far the worst at $7.26 per watt. Of course, these figures will change depending how much you pay. If space matters, however, it's the opposite. Redarc is the most space efficient at only 11.7 square centimetres of storage space per watt of power. Then the Companion at 19.27, iTechWorld 24.28, and the Hardcore is the least efficient at nearly 30 square centimetres of storage space per watt. So at the prices I paid, you're trading off performance against storage space. The cheaper the blanket, the more storage space you're going to need to get the same power. This might be important if storage space is limited for you. A few random notes. The highest individual reading we got for each blanket was 153 watts for the Companion, 147 watts for the Hardcore, 138 for the iTechWorld, and 130 for the Redarc. Under overcast conditions, none of these blankets produce very much power. 5 to 15% of the rated output is all you're likely to get on a cloudy day. I did do a few tests on days with patchy cloud like this, but the sunlight intensity varied constantly as the clouds moved across the sky, so it was impossible to do any fair comparisons given I could only test one blanket at a time. Now all these tests were done using our caravan's internal wiring and Redarc MPPT charger, but you're not going to have those. So how do each of these blankets perform with the accessories they came with? Unfortunately, I forgot to include the Anderson plug cables, but we've already seen they don't make any appreciable difference. The Redarc didn't come with any accessories, so it's not included in this test. So this is the blanket going through the regulator, through the power meter, through the Anderson plug to alligator clips lead and straight into a battery that's only got about 12 volts in it. The iTechWorld with the iTechWorld controller and accessories, you're getting around about 95 watts. Hardcore blanket going through the Hardcore regulator, power meter, and into using the Hardcore alligator clips cables, 117, 118 watts. And finally, the Companion blanket going through the Companion controller, our power meter, and into the Companion alligator clips cable. You're getting from the Companion, wow, 138 watts. So you've got over 9 amps up in the top left corner, and 15 volts. That is a considerable difference. For a bit of fun, I'm going to actually plug the Hardcore controller in here to see if it makes any difference. Alright, we're now doing the Hardcore controller through from the Companion blanket. And we're getting around about 120 watts. 8.5 amps. So the controller for the Companion does make a difference. So the Companion tops this test too, again with the Hardcore in second and the iTechWorld a distant third in this case. Before we finish the performance section, let's touch on the adjustable legs of each blanket and how much power difference they make. The Hardcore's legs attach to the middle of the blanket, which should help prevent the blanket sagging too much. The tethering strap on the leg is fixed and it's quite short, so there's basically no difference in the blanket angle with the leg vertical compared to pulled right back. You're looking at about 34 degrees either way. The iTechWorld's legs are double the length, which may make it more stable, but the panel surface can tend to bow a little bit under its own weight because there's so much area that's not supported by the leg. You can stand the legs up straight or pull them out, giving a range of adjustment from about 51 down to about 40 degrees. The Companion's legs attach to the middle like the Hardcore's, but the Velcro tethering strap allows you to adjust their angle. Companion claims a range of 30 to 45 degrees. I measured 28 to 41 degrees. However, if you stand the leg vertical with the tethering strap loose, you can get up to 47 degrees, and at the lower end you can actually squeeze it all the way down to about 21 degrees. So the Companion's legs definitely have the most adjustability. However, the iTechWorld's are actually a lot quicker to adjust. Rather than fiddling around with Velcro, you just pull each leg back against the elastic to lower the angle, and to raise them it's even easier. Just take the weight of the blanket off the legs and the elastic pulls the legs up straighter without you doing anything. It's very quick and easy, and day to day I quickly grew to love this feature of the iTechWorld. iTechWorld, you guys seriously need to advertise this feature, it's a really good one. But does it really make much difference? Well, we've already seen the Redarc basically doubled its output when it was at the right angle, so if you do get the Redarc, make sure you hang it or drape it across something for best results. What about the others?
11:30 on the morning of Sunday the 5th of February. We've got the companion blanket set up here, set up the 45-degree mark. And the sun is pretty close to being overhead. Now under these conditions, with the clear skies, we're getting about 145 watts. Drop that down to the 30-degree mark. See how that performs.
_21st of February 2023, Buckland Valley. The sun's peeping just above the hills, and this is with the hardcore.
109, 110, 111, 113, 114, 15, 16, 20, 20, 24, 25, 26, 27, 26, 27, 24, 25, 26, 27, 22, 23. A bit more vertical. 22. Okay, start bringing it back. 3, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 26, 24, 23, 21, 18, 15, 14, 13, 12.
So adjustable legs do make a difference. In Australian summers when the sun's overhead, the right angle might only increase power by a few %, but during mornings and afternoons when the sun angle's low, a more vertical angle might give you around 20% more power. However, adjustable legs will be particularly valuable if you're travelling in winter or if you're visiting lower latitude parts of the world like Tasmania or Canada, where the sun's much closer to the horizon. The general rule of thumb is that the solar blanket angle should be equal to the latitude of your location in summer and about 15 degrees higher in winter. You can easily find your latitude in something like Google Maps. Drop a pin, and in the location, the first figure is the latitude. In this example, about 35 degrees, which would be the ideal blanket angle in summer, and about 50 degrees in winter. There's more information linked in the description, plus a tool to calculate your ideal blanket angle, but don't overthink this, as a few degrees either way doesn't make much difference. The companion takes a narrow first place over the iTechWorld here because its legs are more adjustable. But the fact the iTechWorlds are so easy to adjust and also stand a touch straighter than the companion mean it's not much of a margin. iTechWorld's done well here. The hardcore takes third place as it lacks adjustable legs, and of course the Redarc has none. So the companion's taken top spot in all these power tests, ahead of the hardcore and the iTechWorld, so the companion definitely belongs on your shortlist if maximum power is important for you. Now what happened to the iTechWorld blanket? Well, about a month into the testing, I happened to camp next to somebody who had a brand new unused 300 watt iTechWorld blanket who kindly let me plug it into my test setup to get some readings. Now I only had about 15 minutes to do one test, so this isn't as fair a test as the other blankets got. It was about 10:15 on a sunny morning when I connected the 300 watt blanket's thicker Anderson plug cable into our Redarc MPPT regulator and tested both blankets one after the other on the same setup. The 200 watt blanket produced about 138 watts, or about 70% of its rating, which was a bit better than usual. But the 300 watt unit clocked 270 watts, which is 90% of its rating. I even saw a peak of 278 watts. Now, considering this wasn't even the middle of the day, I was very impressed. But it then got me thinking that maybe my 200 watt unit was faulty and all my tests so far were unfair. So I contacted iTechWorld and sent them a video of what I'd seen. They agreed that something seemed to be wrong and asked me to return it under warranty. I'd also noticed the handle had partly torn away before I sent it back, so I assumed between these two faults it'd be replaced under warranty. But unfortunately, when they got it back, they said it wasn't faulty and it was performing just as they expected, and I never got an explanation as to why it performed so much worse than the 300 watt version under identical conditions. They also said the tearing away handle wouldn't get any worse, and they weren't willing to replace it under warranty, instead offering me a $100 refund, which doesn't fix a torn handle, so I didn't think it was a great outcome. Now, I'd done my original purchase plus all the returns correspondence under the same fake name. I do this whenever possible to ensure I get no special treatment when I purchase products for review. At this point, iTechWorld kindly agreed to do a changeover so I could take a 300 watt unit in its place and put this $100 refund towards the $200 cost of the changeover. And I saw the sales guy just pull a new 300 watt unit off the shelf when I picked it up, so I know this wasn't a tricked up unit. Unfortunately, the 300 watt unit I got didn't perform as well. I only did a few tests before putting this video together, but I only averaged about 190 watts, which is 62% of its rating, exactly like the 200 watt unit got. I saw 210 watts once, but never the 270 watts the other unit got me. Now admittedly this was during winter when the 200 watt unit had been tested during summer, so I do need to do some more testing before giving a final verdict on a 300 watt unit. However, it's worth noting that even if I get nothing more than this, 190 watts for $799 still works out to $4.20 per watt, which is actually better value than any of the blankets in this test. It is possible, of course, that the other guy may have just gotten a freakishly good blanket, so mate, if you're watching this, never sell that blanket. So what are they like to live with in normal use? While I love the fact that most of these blankets have legs, it is sometimes helpful to have the option of hanging the blanket vertically to get the blanket off the ground and catch some early morning or late afternoon sun. The Redarc of course doesn't have legs, but it's got 6 really good stainless steel eyelets, one in each of the 4 corners and another along the middle of each of the long sides, so you can hang it horizontally or vertically. It's very light at only 4.8 kilos, so it's quite manageable to lift it up high and hang it in various positions, and there are enough eyelets to support it very well. They're crimped either side of the rubber body material and they feel pretty secure. At the end of all the testing, the Redarc eyelets looked just as good as they did on day 1. The hardcore has got the same configuration of 6 eyelets, and these are crimped on either side of the nylon body. There's a good amount of canvas on either side of the eyelet, so they should be nice and strong without tearing the body. Again, this means you can hang the hardcore up horizontally or vertically, although it's a heavier blanket. Without the accessories, it's 8.8 kilos, so almost twice the weight of the Redarc, and it's big, so it is somewhat more cumbersome to hang up, particularly horizontally. But so long as you don't try to hang it too high, you can manage it if you're tall. I used them a few times and the eyelets held up fine. The iTechWorld only has 2 eyelets on one end, even though there's room for more. This really limits your options as you can only hang it vertically. However, it's a bit long for most convenient hanging heights, but you could get away with it if you had to. The companion has 4 eyelets, one in each corner. Unfortunately, without any eyelets supporting the long side, it's simply too long to hang horizontally. To hang it up, you have to initially suspend the whole 9kg blanket from just one corner eyelet, which strains it uncomfortably, and once you've got both ends hooked on, it sags awkwardly in the middle. Its weight seemed too much for the 2 corner eyelets, which pulled away from the body a bit when I used them. So in practice, it can really only be hung vertically like the iTechWorld, it's just you can choose from which end to hang it. However, it's nearly 2.6 metres long, so unless you're a giant, there's no way you can actually reach high enough to have the whole thing suspended, which means one end ends up sitting on the ground at this awkward angle and often not catching the sun. So no matter how I try, I don't actually see the point of having any eyelets at all if they only use 4. If they'd added a few extra each side, you could safely hang it horizontally, but as it stands, I feel these ones are useless. They don't look as good as the hardcore either. The metal looks thinner, and there's less material around them to hold them into the blanket. I only actually used them once for this experiment, however by the end of our travels they were dented and some of the corners had peeled away. The Redarc takes the podium here because it's lighter than the hardcore. I'm disappointed in the other 2 though, as it would have been very easy for them to add a few more eyelets each side. Before I lost access to the 200-watt iTechWorld blanket, I thoroughly inspected all the blankets to determine their condition after 3 months of use. The surface of all the blankets looked fine. There was none of the scuffing I'd seen on King's blankets in earlier reviews. After 5 months, they all still looked really good with no visible scratching, and I'd be happy with any of these. Each of the blankets I still had at that point had a small ding on the surface, maybe from a stone or something, but it's nothing which would affect the performance. With that all said, the blanket that stood up the best was the Redarc. Apart from that surface ding, it looked as good as new and the rubber was still in really good condition. It was the only blanket which didn't have some obvious degradation over 3 months of testing. Redarc products are expensive, but perhaps this is why. The hardcore would be next best. The eyelet stayed good and solid with no denting, and the overall appearance hardly changed. There were only 2 issues which bothered me at all. The stitching on the elastic strap for the Anderson plug had come undone on one side, and the front surface had faded in comparison to the back, so the front now looks slightly purple rather than black, but you don't really notice it except by comparison to a new unit. Hardcore specifically excludes fading from their warranty policy, so this must be something they're aware of and either can't or won't fix. The other issues were just wear and tear. There was a tiny bit of scuffing to the material on the bottom edge from where it's been on the ground, the transfer in the front of the bag had suffered some damage, although that's mainly from how we stored it, and one of the inside transfers had lifted a touch in the corner. The iTechWorld stood up pretty well too, excluding that power issue, which may or may not have been an issue. The general appearance, the clips and the transfers all looked okay, and the bottom edge which the blanket would rest on in storage showed no obvious damage. The only concern was the handle tearing away from the body. To me, this is a pretty big issue, and I would have expected it to have been covered by warranty. Apart from that, it was just wear and tear. A bit of a cut to the body at one point, a bit of stitching coming undone, and a small amount of wear to the canvas on the bottom edges it stands on while it's set up. It probably ended up looking the dirtiest as well, so bear in mind that the orange does show the dirt a bit more. The companion probably fared the worst. While it still looked quite nice, the material on the front surface had faded noticeably over 5 months from a smart dark grey to a washed out lighter grey or mauve colour. Even the back of the unit, which hadn't faced the sun, is lighter now than it was. Even though the eyelets were hardly used, some got dented, probably because there's not enough protective material around them, and others peeled up at the edges. Some stitching came undone around one seam, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the alligator clips was cracked out of the box. I don't think any of these things should have happened for a $700 blanket. On the positive side, the overall appearance was still good, and the 900 denier polyester canvas had stood up really well with hardly any sign of wear along the bottom edge. However, it certainly fared the worst out of the 4 overall. However, Companion agreed and they did offer me a full refund, which I think is excellent customer service. At the time of recording, their warranty policy thankfully doesn't exclude fading like the Hardcore's does. However, it does exclude fair wear and tear, which of course is a very broad term, and they could argue this covers fading. I've touched on most other usability points already, so I'll just quickly run through some scores. The Redarc's the easiest to move around because it's by far the lightest. Less panels is more when it comes to ease of setup or pack-up, so the iTechWorld's smaller 4x1 configuration just pips the Hardcore's. The Hardcore's power lead is the easiest to get to. The Redarc's is good, but it ends up underneath when you unfold the blanket. The other two are inside the accessory pouch and can get mixed up with other Anderson plug connectors. The iTechWorld's hard curved plastic handle is definitely the most comfortable, although the Redarc's quite nice to carry from underneath too. I felt the Companion's material strip and press stud was the nicest way to keep the blankets closed. Velcro's okay, but I didn't like it as much. The iTechWorld's 2 clips look snazzy, but they're a little bit slower and fiddlier to put back together. Hardcore and iTechWorld are both IP64 rated, which means they can be left out in the rain. The Companion and the Redarc, however, don't have an IP rating at all, which I think's strange, but I'm pretty sure they could both get one with a few tweaks, so hopefully both companies look at this. Okay, that's all the testing done with now. Let's head over to part 4 where we'll pull all that data together, compare the strengths and weaknesses of each product, and pick a winner. See you there.